Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to all. I hope you hear us well. We are almost 50 people online from expected 30 countries, and I hope you're doing well. Use the chat, please, just to mention if you hear us well and your city. It will be helpful for us. My name is Kamal Dadi. I'm part of the IA-Biodiv innovation team in Paris. And I'm more than happy to open this new information session relating to the AI-Biodiv challenge with my partner, Fanny Lachat, scientific project officer at the French National Research Agency. I hope you are doing well and safe during this time of unprecedented pandemic. We thank you warmly for your participation today. And we hope to answer all the questions you may have on this call for proposals built on a collaborative international research approach. Without waiting any longer and before to share with you the agenda of the afternoon, I'm delighted to introduce our esteemed speakers who will guide us during this presentation this afternoon and before to open to question and answers. So from the French National Research Agency, Martine Garnier-Rizet, head of the Digital Science and Mathematics Department, Frédéric Monod, head of the Environment, Ecosystem, Biological Research Department, Loïc Sabarly, coordinator of the Challenge Funding Tool, Anne Liotto, scientific expert in the biodiversity field, Frédéric Precioso, scientific expert in the AI field. From the French Development Agency, Sandrine Boucher, director of the innovation, Peter Hadot, head of the data lab. From Expertise France, Alice Daponi, head of the European Division and Bilateral Projects, Jean-Baptiste Bazot, program coordinator, Julia Bazio, project manager. From the LNE, Olivier Galibert, senior engineer, Virginie Barbosa, engineer and project leader. From the National Museum, Yvan Lebras, project leader and research engineer. So welcome to all. Now I give the floor to Fanny Lachat. So Fanny, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to start by presenting the agenda. In the first section, we're going to present to you the scientific objective of the challenge. And at the end of this section, we will take time to answer your questions. So please use the chat and the question section in the chat to ask any question. We will be happy to answer you. In the second section, we will present you more practical information about the challenge, like the agenda, the modalities, the consortia, etc. And of course, at the end of this section, we will also take time for your question. Sandrine?
Yes, thank you, Fanny. Thank you, Kamal. Welcome, everybody. So my name is Sandrine Boucher. I'm the head of the innovation unit at Agence Française de Développement, and I'm delighted to be with you, to welcome you to this information session. My talk is going to just describe you briefly what is the structure of the challenge and who is involved in the organization of the challenge. First of all, as you can see, this challenge is the fruit of collaboration that has been thought about by Agence Nationale de la Recherche, ANR, and Agence Française de Développement, which I represent. We have decided a few months ago to join our resources and expertise to launch together a call for proposal in order to support research in AI. And the objective of this challenge that we are going to present to you is really to help accelerate research in artificial intelligence and biodiversity by bringing together science researchers from both disciplines and most importantly, also encouraging collaboration between these domains and also between France and AFD partner countries in Africa on both research domains. The main driver for this challenge, characteristics of this challenge, is really to be collaborative, provoke also an opportunity for collective intelligence and interdisciplinary approaches to research, responsible by allowing to address really key environmental issues, and open so that the findings are going to help and guide decision makers in various parts of involved parties, be it governments, local community stakeholders, etc. So this is the theme that is the principles that is underlying the challenge. The governance structure, as you can see from this slide, is structured around two main groups. On the top of the slide, you can see the founders of the challenge, who are again ANR and AFD. We do provide the financing, and we have been working on the structuring of the challenge. ANR is really providing the scientific supervision and management of the challenge, including the scientific protocols. And AFD provides support in reaching out to the scientific research networks in Africa in particular. And we have been asked the support from Expertise France, who is going to be describing you in more details later on the characteristic of the contracting of the challenge, because they are in charge. They have been mandated by AFD to take care of the financing and the contracting with the international consortia. The other part of the governance is composed of the operational consortium on the bottom right end of the slide, and the COPE, Operational Consortium. It's composed of three entities: the Pôle National des Données de Biodiversité, PNDB, which is the National Biodiversity Data Center, the Laboratoire National de Métrologie et d'Essais, LNE, the National Meteorology and Testing Laboratory, and the French Foundation for Biodiversity Research, FRB. And so this operational consortium is in charge of organization and the smooth running of the challenge. It's responsible for the scientific monitoring, the evaluation of AI systems, and the constitution of the data sets during the 4-year span of the challenge. More specifically, LNE will be in charge of validating the scientific proof of AI research activities. PNDB is providing access to the database, which will be used by the teams which are going to be selected. And FRB will provide its research expertise in the field of biodiversity and play a key role in the monitoring and ensuring interaction with and between the selected teams throughout the challenge. And so finally, the teams that are going to be selected will have access to the Jansi High Performance Computing Data Processing Center, and that includes access to the Jansi supercomputer. So this is the main blocks of the governance of the challenge, and I leave the floor to my colleagues from ANR to go into more of the specifics of the challenge. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandrine. I'm Loïc Sabarly. I'm in charge at the ANR of the challenge funding instrument. I will introduce to you the main features of such kind of calls. Challenge calls are defined by specific sets of objective research questions. The idea is to explore simultaneously through each project different approaches or methods for exploring these scientific questions. A second feature is to promote the comparison of such different aspects, the way to explore the different questions, and through different but predefined, commonly defined metrics. And the last one, we are organizing each year evaluation campaigns, comparison campaigns, which provides resources to share results, give an evaluation of the progresses and ideas that are studied during the challenge. More specifically, for the AI-Biodiv challenge, the basic ambition was to develop AI research for enhanced exploration and exploitation of biodiversity data. We have wanted to provide additional resources to the teams through the operational consortium. This consortium will be in charge of providing the teams with data and a virtual research environment, which will be called AI-Biodiv net, with a guidance to produce the common metrics for the annual campaigns, though this COPE will be in charge of the organization of all the events during the challenge. And last, it will be in charge as well with the animations throughout the challenge. We have wanted to induce during this challenge and promote cooperation between ideas, between the teams, between the projects, in order to hope for emerging meta global interesting ideas all along the program. So Han, it's to you.
I think it's Frédéric. But I can take it. Okay. The objectives of the call are structured in different stages and levels that we will emphasize later. But it was overheaded by a lead question, which we took some time to set up using the help of a scientific board that we gathered a year and a half ago. And we ended up proposing this lead question that is on board: what predictive models can be constructed and how can more powerful indicators be developed to predict and evaluate the evolution of biodiversity under the constraints of climate change and or anthropic activity? And now we will emphasize in more detail the different objectives of the call.
I don't hear anything.
Frédéric,
yes.
Do you hear us?
Yes, now I hear you, Kamal.
Okay, fantastic.
Okay.
Anne, maybe you can go on, or is it your turn, Frédéric?
Did Han presented the previous slide?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. I lost the sound. I lost the sound. So, okay. So sorry.
Go ahead.
My turn. So, in this challenge, as Sandrine has mentioned it before, and has Han has presented in the previous slide, the objective is to make progress in two domains: biodiversity and AI. So, what will be provided to the consortium in the challenge will be raw data from biodiversity. So we'll have structured data like data sets, ontologies, and so on, and unstructured data, image, sound, text. And so the objective, what we expect from the consortium on the AI side, is to be able to address all the kind of data that we will provide. We will do our best to provide as many modalities and as many complex data as we can to address the same domain, as we will detail later on. And so from the structured data side, to get approaches related to knowledge representation, reasoning, game theory. And on the unstructured data side, any technique that is able to deal with machine learning, so also addressing the problems that you will face in biodiversity, meaning few data to build the models, and so models which will be frugal in the amount of annotated data, like active learning, transfer learning, zero-shot learning, and so on. Of course, because this approach has to address the problems to non-experts in machine learning, so being able to be understood and manipulated in collaboration with experts in biodiversity, but not in AI side. The objective is also to provide models which are explainable and interpretable.
Okay, now about the second objective is focused on designing models and predictive indicators for biodiversity research. So this is the biodiversity side of the challenge. And the idea here is underlined by decision makers and political and policy issues, particularly the France National Biodiversity Plan, where reconquering biodiversity is made a question of survival for our societies. And therefore, there is a need for integrative indicators to quantify and map the state of biodiversity. And there is also a need for dedicated solution to manage complex systems and heterogeneous information, such as what we find in the biodiversity environment. So the goal that we defined for this challenge is first to help advance knowledge in the field of biodiversity, including the predictive and functional modeling of system and ecosystems. The idea here is to improve what already exists, such as enriching the models with more variables and more data in the input, and also enrich their explainability, as stochastical and statistical approaches have managed to propose probable trends, but less understanding of the underlying mechanisms. The second aspect is the possibility of producing predictive indicators by exploring the AI solutions. The idea here is to develop new indicators and tools for prediction, and therefore to better predict the effectiveness of suggested ways for management of the biodiversity. The models at stake arise from the scientific challenges specific to the field of biodiversity. So AI solutions should enable considerable progress by focusing specifically on predictive models and indicators, like dynamic approaches, inclusion of exogenous or endogenous influencing factors, pathways to extinction or regeneration, etc. Also, we emphasize the problems of assembly models, such as models of interaction, of competition, like how is it possible in a habitat to have competition, cooperation, and cohabitation, and also the feedback that undergoes those situations. Also, network analysis, including geographical and ecological connectivities, like links to predictive models, and also predictions of the ecological state of ecosystems and biodiversity and/or genetic diversity.
So, as we have said in the previous slides, the objective of the challenge is making advance in biodiversity and AI. So, regarding what we have presented 2 slides ago on AI, here, it's not only that you could address this data from structured data and unstructured data, that would be enough in terms of AI progress. What we hope is that from this challenge in the coming years, since it's for 3 years, there will be a proposition, there will be construction of hybrid models, hybrid AI models that will make symbolic and non-symbolic data talk together, and being able to provide models that are able to address both kind of structured and unstructured data to get the coupled approaches that are both data-driven and knowledge-driven. That will be able to...
We lost Frédéric.
I'm here. Yes.
Shall we?
So that's
you're back.
Meta learning, and also, of course, more complex models like relational learning that are able to manage the relations between the data, structured and unstructured data. And again, always keeping in mind that we want explainable and interpretable learning models at the end, because these will be tools that will be applied by non-experts in AI.
So here we have set up a sketch of the integration of the 3 levels of the objectives that we just developed through the AI-Biodiv net virtual environment that will be provided for the teams. In this environment, in this virtual environment that we call AI-Biodiv net, the data sets are made of structured and unstructured and heterogeneous data, as Frederick developed, such as images, sounds, physical data, time series, ontologies, etc. And also data from various sources, sensors, in situ and field data that are sufficiently documented. The qualification to be planned is based on existing standards. The nature of the data can be occurrence, trait, or interaction data. It can be context and impact data, like physical or human geographical information, environmental conditions, etc. It can be also climate factors, anthropic or other kind of disturbances. The platform gathers together with the data the implemented algorithm developed by the research consortiums on the 3 types of AI approaches that Frédéric just mentioned earlier. And the biodiversity specific issues that is sketched on the right side of the slide is really dealing about the knowledge and understanding challenges of complex systems, which will improve understanding, enriching the model, and predicting for management. And so the long-term data set objective is one of the issues of this challenge. The idea is not only to set up a virtual environment that will live further after the end of this challenge, is also that the data that will be implemented in this virtual environment will also be available after the challenge for the community to continue working on it. After a long exploration of what was feasible, as much from the scientific board that was consulted in 2 years ago, like I mentioned earlier, and also from our own exploration on the open databases around the world, after a long hope to be able to manage a 2-fold challenge dealing with both marine and forest ecosystems as situations to test the transferability of the AI solutions in the face of what is actually really available to open access of raw data, we decided to focus on coastal marine environment and particularly on the Mediterranean and the Pacific region. Now the COPE, the operational consortium, will be responsible to make the data available on the platform. And there is also strong expectation towards the team to contribute to enrich the data as much from the scientific work done on the data as with the new data that will be provided by the teams. But here it is not provided by the project, it should be existing data. And the last point that should be underlined is the fact that the objective of this challenge is really to follow the FAIR principle and to remain open access. The FAIR principle being findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. Frédéric?
Yes, so as we have explained in the previous slides, the objective of the challenge is to get consortium that are a mix of both biodiversity and AI teams. You may have diverse competences and skills on the AI side and biodiversity side. So you may have several teams on the AI side with symbolic groups and non-symbolic groups. Same thing on biodiversity. to answer some requests or some comments from the previous chat. Just to remind you, there's a question widget on the side where you have people and chat, and this question widget is to help us to manage the questions. So if you have questions, don't hesitate to write questions in this widget on the right hand side of the screen. And so from the previous questions we had in the previous session last week, we can already mention that the expertise on marine environment is of course preferable, because that will be the kind of data that you have, but it's not mandatory. The consortium will not be considered as an eligible criterion that you have experience with marine environment. You still have it's still required that you have some expertise in biodiversity in the consortium. Same thing for AI. So the AI biodiversity net, the AI-Biodiv net data will be made available at the start of the project. We are still gathering the data. As we have said before, we are trying to collect as many modalities of data that we can, so that to offer the biggest place where you will be able to play during these 3 years. Just to remind you that you will all be evaluated by the COPE, the operational consortium committee, on the same data, the data that we will provide. If any consortium wants to use external data that you have on your side, you can, at the only condition that you will share them on the platform with all the consortium. It's not fair, and it's not really interesting if you have very specific data that makes a big difference, and that you are the only one to benefit from. So the idea is that you can use any data that you have on your side, but then it means that you will share them with all the consortium, that they will decide to use or not, but you all play with the same weapons is not a good word for biodiversity, but the same assets, the same tools. And so in the several committees from the operational committee, the several meetings that we'll have with the operational committee organized all along the challenge, then there will be discussion and exchange, so that all the consortium will share their scientific productions all the year long in the challenge. Okay, and
so we have. Please, Fanny, go ahead.
Thank you very much. This is the end of the first session, and we wanted to take time to answer all of your questions. So we saw 3 so far on the chat, mostly about the data. The first one was, what if the data are already available at the European level and tools available at AFB and Elixir? I'm not so sure I understand the question, but maybe someone does. Please.
Yeah, if I understand well, in that case, for example, if you have your own data, or if you plan to use, or if you're considering to use data that you know that they are available, granted. I mean, we have a lot of promises of data available, and then when you go to look for them or check them, that it's not exactly the case. But if you know, so to Damien, if you know that these data will be interesting for the challenge, please don't hesitate to drop an email to the mailing list of the challenge, and that will be more than happy to start from tomorrow morning to download them and to put them on the platform to share. So it's the same for everyone in the chat here. If you know that there are data that would be interesting for the biodiversity analysis on marine environments in Mediterranean Sea and Pacific, please don't hesitate to point them to us. It's about a year that we are working on collecting the data, identifying which one would be interesting. So we might point some data that we already have, but please don't hesitate. It will be more than appreciated from the operational committee.
What I want to just add on this point is that what we're looking for is really the raw data. it's not the transformed data or the synthesized data that are actually right now available, like on GBIF or other kind of large worldwide data sets. We need the raw data that allowed to make those synthetic data available. So if you know of raw data open access available, then we are more than happy to have them included in the challenge. But it's really about field data, the basic ones.
Anne, maybe you can take the next question, which is the data are the data labeled?
Those that we have found so far, we want them to be labeled, but we know that, so what we have collected so far and that is available to the beginning of the challenge is labeled. Basically, there is still some work that the COPE is going to do to work on to improve the way it is organized, but so far it is labeled. But we know that there are some data available in the teams, in the research teams around everywhere that could be interesting to the challenge, but that need to be annotated. And so there is part of the work that is suggested in this challenge is to develop solutions for those lacking annotations.
And is the
I don't know, I hope I answered properly.
Is the call specific for marine environment? That's the next question for you.
Yes.
Yes, it is definitely specific to marine environment. We think that you don't need to be an expert in terms of AI solutions and everything, but it is a good point to have a marine biodiversity expert in the team, or at least closely involved.
The next one is, does the fact that
Excuse me, Fanny, maybe I can add on this point is that if you don't have marine expert in your team, we have set up a platform for matchmaking. So it really is, the idea is also to facilitate the encountering of teams in a field that maybe you're not used to collaborate in those different research things.
The next question is, does the fact that data will be made available on the platform at the beginning, at the challenge, and the fact that the methods developed by all the consortium will be compared during the challenge mean that we should all work on the same ecological objects? Yes.
I would say, yeah, I would say not exactly. The objective of the challenge is to provide more sophisticated indicators. So if you think about the EBVs in the marine domain, there's the EOVs, that's a specific subclasses of the essential biodiversity variables. And the objective is to make something better than the EOVs that are available now. So you may have consortium working on different indicators. You don't need to contribute to the same indicator. That will be part of your proposition, of your proposal to define the indicator that you want to contribute on. But it's still the same ecological domain. And if you want to say,
yes, maybe I can develop a little bit more. An ecological object, for example, the habitat is an ecological object, and the population of fish or of squids is another ecological object. So in this sense, no, it doesn't have to be on the same ecological object. The idea is really to be in the same environment with different issues or different ecological issues that manifest in different ways, as referring to anthropic climatic constraints. And the idea is really how to find the best or the better, or how to improve the indicators and the models that are running nowadays, and better understanding like the functioning of the functioning of an ecosystem, the way the habitats are used as indicators, for example, could be improved, but it can be in terms of AI solution compared to what is developed on fish populations, that could be that could lead to other types of indicators. So the question in terms of ecological objects, I would say no, it doesn't have to be on the same ecological object. It has to be on the same major environment, so as to develop indicators that are comparable with tools that will be confronted and synchronized, not necessarily synchronized, but at least like put together into a dialogue to have both the possibility to be improved by one another.
And the next question is about the consortia. So it's for Peter. What is the name and role of African AI and biodiversity laboratories in the project consortia?
Yeah, so thanks, Dominique, for this particular question. We actually believe that the researchers on the continent have the right expertise, especially in AI, also in biodiversity, to contribute at the same level as experts in the global north. And the whole idea behind this particular challenge is also to collectively build inclusive AI systems or solutions to be able to address the underlying questions that we're trying to find. So that is the more reason why actually AFD actually pushed that researchers on the continent who are often not well represented in the international scene in conferences, and some of these great initiatives are often left out because they do not have the financial backing and probably other resources. So the African AI researchers and then the biodiversity experts do have a key role to play in the establishment of the consortium. So they are actually free to build themes, obviously also finding partners from the French side. That's why Anna actually talked about a platform that is readily available to all. So they do have a great role to play, and that's what I can say to this particular question. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Now another question. It's in French. Est-ce qu'un projet basé sur des bases de données autres que celles que vous mettez à disposition est éligible?
So I think we have
already answered that,
yeah.
Frederick.
Yeah, but let's clarify it. You can, as long as the data that you provide, that you will use, are provided to all the consortium, so they will be shared on the platform of the challenge, and that the evaluation is made on the same data that will be provided by the operational committee. Again, don't think a challenge as a competition. That's a specific word on purpose. So it doesn't mean that we will look for the best consortium or the worst one. There is no competition between. It's just that if you apply your methods, your models on the same data, then there can be synergies between the contributions. While if everyone is working in his own domain, there might be no link at all in the contributions. So the idea is that year after year, all the consortium will contribute all together to some common objective of making progress in biodiversity using AI and AI. But so that's the reason why you will be evaluated on the same data.
Thank you. Is the expected data format for sharing described somewhere?
Soon.
Yes, exactly. Soon, early summer, at the beginning of the summer, probably.
Exactly.
Yeah.
As I understood, the strategies for fast and accurate annotation could be a step for defining the project. Anne, you mentioned this?
I'm not sure that's what I mentioned. Maybe I was not clear enough. I'm not sure I understand the question, actually.
I think, yeah, it's you may not focus on only annotating the data. It's not the objective of the project. There will be annotated data in the data that we will share. There will be also unannotated data. So it might be part of the contribution of the consortium to build an annotation tool. And here you see the interest of working all on the same data at least once a year during the evaluation phases, so that if some group has designed an amazing annotation tool, everyone can benefit from this for the next run the year after. So it might be interesting to define such a tool in the proposal. Just to be clear, the evaluation of the consortium will be made on the ideas, the progress that are proposed both on AI and biodiversity side. You may have amazing biodiversity ideas, but if you use AI from the shelf and that's it, that will not be a selected consortium. So you have to find how to make progress on both sides and for which objective.
And the next question is, why does the call focus exclusively on marine environment?
Okay, I take it just to weigh Frank. Hi, Frank. Colleague of mine, that's the reason why. So that we had plenty of questions on this. And there's also Benoit Derijard, is the call restricted to marine biology? Yes, it is. So to make the story short, there was a scientific committee that was helping us at the beginning of the challenge. So there were 13 or 14 experts from biodiversity and AI that are not here present. They can participate to the challenge. And we hoped at the beginning, our hope was to both address marine domain and forest domain. The thing is that I was myself, I have to admit, very naive, thinking that there's probably less problem to access the biodiversity data than medical data, because you need the patient acceptation for sharing the data. And I was thinking that the raccoon or the birds are not in the same situation. Actually, it's not exactly the case. The biodiversity data has difficult to access because each team is very protecting carefully the data. And so it was immediately, very quickly obvious that we would not manage to address two domains. And because the domain of marine has made this extra work compared to other biodiversity domain to develop a subclass of EBVs, of essential biodiversity variables, the EOVs. Part of the work was already done because you have now indicators based on EOVs. So it gives you directions in which you could follow to provide more sophisticated indicators. So that's the reason why it's only marine environments. For any reason that maybe Anne can comment, there are a lot more biodiversity data on marine environments available worldwide than any other field that we have looked for. And it's a year work to collect, to identify this data. So believe us, we have done our best to stick to our first objective, but it was not manageable.
Thank you. And I have the hard job to look at the clock. And I think this is time for section 2. Section 2. I'm so sorry we didn't answer all of your questions, but we will take time at the end of session 2 to continue answering your question. So I'm going to start with the next slide. The consortium, the French consortium that will be funded by INR, and there will be African French consortium, which will be funded by Expertise France. Those consortium should involve at least one of the AFD's African partner countries. The project will last for 4 years. It will start in January next year. For the French consortia, which will be selected, the budget is 500,000 euros each. And for the 2 African French consortia, which will be selected, the budget is 650,000 euros each. as we mentioned, we now have a website for you to try to find your partner if you're looking for an AI expert, a biodiversity expert, etc. So on this website, you can log in and then post a message where you will be able to explain your expertise and what you're looking for to create a consortia and a project. So please feel free to use this website. The link is in the chat box. The call is open until the last day of August this year. In October, the scientific evaluation panel will select the admissible proposal. In October, November, those teams will be invited for interviews, and the steering committee will then decide in November which projects will be funded. In November, we will also publish the results, and all the projects that were selected will start in January 2022. On the evaluation criteria, there are 4 main criteria. Of course, they are well more described than here on the call text. So please, if you're interested, go read the call text to learn more about those criteria. The first one is the relevance and suitability of the proposal in view of the objectives that we presented to you earlier and the expectation of the challenge. The second one is the quality of the consortium and scientific ambition. For example, the competence, expertise, involvement on every partner. The third one is the implementation of the project. For instance, the appropriateness of the grant amount requested or the risk management. And finally, the global impact of the project, which should involve the potential use of the results by the scientific community. On your proposal, you are expected to present how you see the 3 AI research approaches working together, to describe how scientific communities in AI and biodiversity can respond together to those objectives, to document your carbon footprint on the AI technologies and methods that will be developed throughout the challenge, to describe your contribution to the IA-Biodiv nets environment, and finally, to set out how you intend to incorporate this interdisciplinary, inter-consortium, and intra-project coordination function. The calendar of the challenge. The challenge will be divided in 4 successive annual cycles. The first 2 will be focused on Mediterranean data, and the last 2 on Pacific data. The first cycle is called Dry Run. It is a particular cycle where all the team with the copy will work together in a joint construction approach, and this will be highly reflective in order to build together the next 3 years. So the evaluation task, how it looks like, the data, etc. So this run will define the rest of the challenge. And the next 3 cycles, which will be meetings of preparation, of reporting, individual work period, and evaluation tasting campaigns. It will be collective work, of course, devoted to the comparative production of AI solution and predictive models. During those cycles, you should attend regular events in Paris and Montpellier. The calendar of those events are described in more detail in the call text. Finally, for me, the modality for the French consortia. The French consortia will be funded by the ANR. It should involve only French partner, which will be funded. And it should include at least a public actor involved in the French research. Please read the rule carefully. for the French partner to see the modalities and, of course, the financial ANR rules to see the costs that are eligible, etc. And Julia will present the modalities for,
So, as explained before, the international consortium selected in the frame of the challenge will be contracted and financed by Expertise France under French Development Agency financing. And I will now present the application process for the consortium that are requesting a grant from us. All the information that I will now summarize can be found in the terms of participation for international consortia and in the text of the challenge. Concerning the application process, international consortiums are defined as consortiums with a lead partner that is not French and includes partners requesting funding only from Expertise France. This call for proposals is open to proposals that include at least one French public research body partner in each consortium. In the frame of this challenge, project proposals will be submitted in one step. Only one project proposal has to be submitted per consortium, and it has to be written in English. It has to be submitted on the ANR web submission platform, and it is compulsory to comply with the format and conditions laid out in the call for proposal available on the ANR website. There are some applicants' regulatory obligations, which are ethics and scientific integrity and GDPR. And they're all listed in the documents that I said before. Concerning the eligibility, project proposals that do not meet the eligibility criteria will not be considered for funding under any circumstances, and a project proposal may be declared ineligible at any point of the process. The eligibility criteria are the theme of scientific collaboration, the duration, composition of the consortium, partners' commitment, completeness, and to be part of an eligible country. So that means that the challenge is open to scientific communities present in the eligible states in accordance with the list of IFD African partner. You can find it in the terms of participation for international consortium. The proposal composition. So a complete proposal should include the scientific documentation and the mandatory and the additional annexes for international consortium that will be soon be available on the ANR website. When a project is selected for funding, Expertise France contracts with the institution, so the legal entity defined by the lead partner, and not with the scientific manager, the individual. The beneficiary is the main contact person for Expertise France, and it represents and acts on the behalf of all the partners. It devises and coordinates the actions implementation. To be eligible for a grant, the lead applicant must meet the conditions explained in the terms of participation. Concerning the amount of the grant, it has been explained before by Fanny. So the project proposal must be based on a minimum sum of 450,000 euro and a maximum sum of 650,000 euro. The French partner's share of the grant application will represent a maximum of 50% of the total grant requested for the project. Concerning the costs eligibility, you can refer to the document grant contract, the Annex 2, that will also be available on the ANR website. Grants will be paid directly to the consortium lead partner, so the international beneficiary, which will be responsible for transferring the funds to other members of the consortium. A consortium agreement or preliminary agreement is strongly recommended in order to present the methods of internal governance between all partners and the lead partner. It can be included in an annex if it's available. Anyway, all the partners must sign the one statement, Annex E, attached to the call for proposal, and this must be included with the project proposal. Following the decision to award a grant, the beneficiaries will be offered a contract based on the sample grant contract, Annex H, that will also be available online. The list of the eligible and ineligible costs can be found on the online documents on the ANR website. And please note that the for French partners, permanent staff costs under public law already supported by the French state are not eligible. That's all for the modalities for the African-French consortium, and do not hesitate to contact us writing to the same email contact address on the ANR website.
Many thanks, Julia. Shall we go back to the questions? Maybe a question on the GBIF data. Frédéric, do you want to take this one?
Yes, or Anne if she's around, but she mentioned it before. Actually, no, we won't consider GBIF data because they are not raw data. So they have already been pre-processed in the objective of the colleagues that were using the data at first. And so the objective of the challenge here is to provide as possible only raw data. So that every consortium can have its own pre-processing or own cleaning of the data and so on. So that will be only raw data, so not the GBIF one. Anne, you want to comment on this?
Yes, there will be a collaboration with GBIF. The idea is also possibly to improve the indicators or the type of data that GBIF is providing. But so far, the data that are used by GBIF to provide the data on the GBIF base, I mean, the background data are not available. At least we could not get access to them so far. So we will not use what is on open access on the GBIF base because it's not raw data. And if there is a chance that we can get access to the raw data on the background data of GBIF, then it will improve in a large amount what we already have. But part of the data in the marine environment is raw data, the type of GBIF, but on the ocean and marine environment, we do have access to some of those raw data. And this is also one of the reasons why we decided to go on for marine environment instead of more general biodiversity.
Thank you, Anne. A lot of questions are already covered.
There is one maybe
in the chat box.
Yeah, there is maybe one from Eloise Müller. In our project proposal, we will not have access to the potentially viable data. Therefore, we will describe our scientific approach with the data we had. Is the way you expect? We think. Actually, no. We should be as soon as possible provide a description of the data that will be made available, if not the data. So we won't be able to provide access to the whole set of data that we are collecting currently, but we will provide as precisely described description of the data, as detailed possible description of the data. So that should be enough to integrate this in the proposal. If it answers.
There is another question of Eloise Müller. For example, we could work on coral reef, seagrass, or macrofauna, and I have difficulty to understand how we can compare methods. We could work on the extension of seagrass and on the biodiversity indicators, which is not the same reasoning or the same approaches. So in terms of biodiversity, I have difficulties to answer that, but I have the feeling that it is really typically into the AI solutions. So maybe Frédéric, you could answer that.
Yeah, so less than you on the biodiversity, but that's also related to a question from Damien, just above, Damien Eveillard, just above, saying Tara Oceans, marine data are not equivalent if we target local longitudinal data, mesoscale and global, not call the same strategies for modeling and identifying new indicators and biomarkers, how to merge all expertise in one question. So you don't have to merge all these expertise into one question. You have to provide one indicator that you think that would be a new big step forward for biodiversity if it would become a new EOV. That's more or less the objective. Defined the EBV for marine coastal data that you would think that will be useful for the decision makers to make good decision restricted on that domain, on that environmental domain in the next future. And so that's the reason why we have two zones, the Mediterranean and the Pacific Sea, in the Pacific area, because the objective, and that's what you could expect from AI models, is to be able to adapt one model that you have designed, for example, for Pacific environment to Mediterranean environment, possibly with some adaptation, some steps. It's not just transferable from one to the other, but that's what we expect AI models that will be provided to be able to do. So that with possibly retraining or refining the model to be able to adapt. If you have to build a new data analysis AI model at each new environment, then that's not scalable and that's not the objective. So the point here is not possibly to answer in one question, but to design the essential biodiversity variable and a new indicator that you would think would make the difference. Yeah, Han, sorry.
Yes, I just wanted to bounce on what you just detailed for Damien, to emphasize on Eloise Muller's question. The idea is that, for example, you take the example of the extension of seagrass. The extension of seagrass could be some sort of a biodiversity indicator. And also there could be some ecosystem models trying to explain how the seagrass is in some place reducing, in some other place extending, and with the biodiversity of the ecosystem that is regressing or improving, and with the anthropic factors around. So it doesn't have to be an indicator. It can also be a modeling. And the modeling, I mean, the challenge is really focused on both. Modeling is open to both modeling and indicators. And you can make the choice for developing an indicator, but you can also make the choice for improving existing models in terms of their richness, of the amount of variables that are input, or the relevance of the data that are involved in the model, that kind of things. And I think in this way, whether you work on coral reefs or on seagrass or on microfauna, the principles, the keys that you mobilize to elaborate the solution, the AI solutions, are supposed to be kind of generic. So it could be on seagrass, it could be on coral reef, but the idea of the overall model that you try to enrich is more of a way of thinking the problem. I don't know if I'm clear. Maybe Frederick, you can develop on that.
Not much more than what you said, and related to what I said before. If you plan the AI models to be able to be applied in different areas, you have they have to reach some abstraction of the data and the objective that you have. So regarding what Han said, I think that answered the question.
And I think in a certain way, it's the same with the Tara data. If you take local or longitudinal data or mesoscale or global scale, it is not so much the point. The point is how you think the system, how you think the data together, and how you make them explain one another. And then you can change scale. And then by the process of changing scale is another issue that could be a question that you want to develop in your project, for example. So there are there are all different ways to answer your questions. All your questions are relevant, and there is not one question, one response to your questions.
And you can try to put on the AI methods to adapt to the scale, or to design AI methods that will be adaptive to the scale of the data. So that's the reason why we have answered this earlier. There will not be one objective for all the consortium, and the challenge will not be to compare the consortium on the same indicator, but to see how much the initial objective of the indicator, for example, to design a new indicator that is scalable based on the AI models that you will provide, how much it is indeed on the data that will be provided by the operational committee.
Thank you, Frédéric. A question, I think we didn't ask this one, based on Anne's explanation. The strategies for fast and accurate annotation could be a step for defining the project.
Yeah, we have answered this in the previous session. That's the. It might be interesting that the consortium indeed plan to annotate data themselves, because some of the data will not be annotated. But that's on the consortium to decide, or they can design AI techniques that are able to manage unsupervised data and supervised data. So all this is open.
Okay, thank you, Frédéric. A question in English, but the answer is in French. Are private partners such as companies eligible as consortium members or as subcontractors?
Yes, thank you. So for I saw the answer from Martin, the INR in the INR. So for the French consortia, yes, it is eligible as long as you have in the consortia also a public partner impliqué dans la recherche française, as Martin wrote.
Thank you,
And
Fanny.
concerning the international consortium, we will verify this point and come back to you in the written answers and questions.
Thank you, Julia. A new arising question. How many consortia will be funded? So,
yeah, I think.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I think I answered this question during the presentation. So 3 consortia for the French, only French consortia, 3 of them, and 2 African French consortia. So it will be 5 in total. 3 French and 2 French African.
Thank you, Fanny. Well, I guess we covered lots. We have 20 minutes, so please feel free to ask your question in the chat box. Tell us where we are, where you are actually, and if the challenge is in your mandate as a research center.
Maybe I can take again the chance of these minutes without question. That there is on the challenge page on ANR, you have an email address. If you have any ideas of data, raw data available that could match with the domains that are focused on in the challenge, and that could be interesting for everyone, please don't hesitate to drop an email as soon as possible, because then we have the job to get the data, organize them so that they will be clean and available at the start of the challenge. So I see plenty of contributions, of propositions, so don't hesitate to send by email some pointers, some link, so that we will be able to manage this data in advance. Thank you.
And a rising question from so did not understand how African countries were concerned by the call, since none of their environments are taken into account. So maybe shall I give the answer to Peter, if you are with us? Do you have a date when the data info will be available?
No, we don't have a precise date. June, the earliest, beginning of July, the latest. That's the best we can say right now.
Thank you, Fanny. I don't know if Peter is with us.
I don't see him in the people present
okay.
on the so maybe you can give the answer.
I can give maybe a clue, part of the answer. Well, the question from Eric. So actually, half of the challenge is dedicated to Africa. I mean, among the 5 consortium, 3 are French, will be French, and the 3 are African and French. So the idea is to involve scientists in the field and biodiversity field as well in the selection. So not sure to get actually the meaning of the question, since none of their environments are taken into account. If you can maybe just specify.
If I understand well the question, that will be the case for most of the consortium for France and Africa, at least for Pacific. So yeah, actually there might be some French teams in Pacific, but that's more or less the case. The idea of these models are actually to be able, and that's the point of working on Pacific and Mediterranean Sea, is to build models that are adaptable. And that's also the reason why having expertise in marine is not mandatory in the consortium. It's of course preferable because you will get some advance compared to others. But if you are expert in environment on other domains in Africa, and you want to challenge your expertise on marine data, that's not a problem. You should be able to design AI models with your expertise to address biodiversity everywhere.
And plus, the marine and coastal environment are an issue in many countries in Africa. So even if Mediterranean is a border for very few of them, there are many other countries in Africa that have coastal zone. But like Frédéric said, the issue is really to manage data and manage scientific issue in biodiversity that can be transferable. And so after you have managed to make one transfer from Mediterranean to Pacific, then we suppose and we project that it could be transferable, or it should be transferable to other types of ecosystems.
Yeah,
it would be like another challenge.
And that's the question from Dominique Hervé. I understand reduced to North African laboratories in Mediterranean. As Anne just said, if you have expertise in coastal marine environment anywhere else around Africa, then that should be a plus for you compared to teams that have no expertise in this. So again,
Hi, Julia.
I don't think the
sorry.
geographical zones are not a key issue to selecting the interest of African countries. It should be just the marine environment, for example, because there are experts in Africa, in many African countries, on this team.
Question from Inria in Chile. We are working here on AI and marine biodiversity. Is there a way for us to participate in a consortium as a Chilean institution?
Yes, you can be a partner in a French consortia. However, you would not be funded, and you might not be access to the GenC either, but you definitely can join a consortium.
Does hindcast from hydro sediments biogeochemical models could be interesting data? I don't know if Anne or Frédéric, you want to take this one?
The biochemical models on the interface between the soil and the water column is, of course, interesting, in particularly the issues of eutrophication and destocking of phosphorus, for example, or other kind of chemicals, or the degradation of organic matter, all the sorts of things. So yes, it could be interesting models to develop or to understand. We have not so far managed to collect data from the I mean biochemical data from the sediments in the Mediterranean shores. So the data set so far is empty on this aspect, but we have hope to get infos on that, because we know there are some data sets announced to be available, but we have not managed so far to get them, to get a hand on them.
But if Eloise has and she wants to share, we are welcoming you. The reason why we don't make the data available is because to really get access, I mean, not only get promises, but get access to the raw data and being able to transfer them to the challenge platform requests some political time and processes, some protocols. So it takes a lot more time than what we were expecting and hoping, but that we are on the way to manage all this. But please, Eloise, if you have this kind of data and you want to share, that will be more than happy to collect them and to share them on the platform. And that this challenge can also be a way of unifying biodiversity, at least on the marine environment, to share this data. So that's something that could be a plus. That's also one of the contribution we hope from the challenge, because the data from the challenge will be made available even after the end of the challenge, and the platform also. So that's, we really hope to build an ecosystem around these questions, so that anyone that wants to address this question in 5-10 years, the platform will still be there, managed by ANR. So if you want to share some data with the community, please let us know.
Thank you, Frédéric. We have 10 minutes before to close the webcast. So if you have any last question, please feel free. Shall we close the webcast if there is no additional question? So thank you very much all for your participation. Maybe a last one. Yeah, many thanks everyone. Many thanks for the speakers as well. And hope to see you soon through the application process. So have a good day, and thank you to all, and thanks to all.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye-bye.